My golden child sister blamed me for her affair, got me disowned, and now my parents want $75,000. Think your family's messed up? You haven't heard anything until you hear how my perfect little sister, Emily, got me exiled from my own family. And then, years later, had the nerve to demand I pay for her second lavish wedding. I'm not talking a small, intimate gathering, we're talking a full-blown, budget-busting, Kardashian-level extravaganza. Buckle up, because this is a roller coaster of betrayal, entitlement, and straight-up family drama. My younger sister, Emily, and I use the term sister with a heavy dose of sarcasm, because we're about as different as night and day, somehow managed to convince my parents, the people who are supposed to love their children equally, to completely cut me off. Disown me. Erase me from their lives like I was some embarrassing stain they needed to scrub away. Why? Because after she cheated on her husband, a man who was one of my closest friends, I committed the unforgivable sin of staying friends with him. And the cherry on top of this toxic, festering wound? She expects me, the exiled sister, the black sheep, to foot the bill for her new wedding. I'm talking tens of thousands of dollars. The sheer, unmitigated gall, the breathtaking audacity of this woman. It still makes my blood boil. It all started about 5 years ago, a period that feels like several lifetimes compressed into one. My sister, Emily, and let's be crystal clear here, she's always been the golden child, the princess, the shining star in my parents' eyes, the one who could do no wrong, was going through the messy, agonizing, drawn-out process of divorcing her husband, David. David wasn't just some random guy she'd picked up at a bar, he was practically a brother to me. We met freshman year at college. I went to Berkeley, she went to, a slightly less prestigious state school, and we bonded instantly over our shared love of indie music, obscure documentaries, and late-night philosophical debates. We were inseparable, two peas in a pod, kindred spirits. Emily, on the other hand. Well, let's just say our relationship was strained. She's 3 years younger than me, a gap that felt like a chasm when we were growing up. My parents, especially my mom, always treated her like she was this fragile, delicate flower that needed to be protected from the harsh realities of the world. I, meanwhile, was the responsible one, the mature one, the one who had to understand and be patient with Emily's quirks. I remember one time, when we were kids, Emily accidentally ruined my meticulously crafted science fair project, a working model of the solar system that I'd spent weeks on. She just spilled a giant glass of juice all over it, claiming she tripped. And my parents? They told me to be more careful about where I left my things. They bought her a new doll to make her feel better. That was the dynamic, always. Emily got away with everything. I got blamed for everything. Naturally, this constant, blatant favoritism created, well, let's just call it what it was, deep-seated resentment. Emily was spoiled, incredibly entitled, and frankly, just a difficult person to be around. She had this aura of expecting the world to cater to her every whim, to revolve around her like she was the sun. I vividly remember the first time David saw a picture of Emily. It was a family photo, one of those awkward, forced smile gatherings that my mom insisted on every year. He was instantly smitten. He kept saying, "Who is that? You have to introduce me." I actually tried to dissuade him, believe it or not. I knew Emily, knew her personality, knew the drama that inevitably followed her like a dark cloud. I told him, "David, trust me, you don't want to go there. She's a lot." But he was persistent, charming, and, well, he was my best friend. So, against my better judgment, and perhaps fueled by a misguided sense of obligation, I introduced them. It was at a casual get-together, a barbecue at my apartment. I remember watching them interact, feeling this strange mix of apprehension and resignation. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. They dated all through the rest of college, a whirlwind romance that everyone seemed to ooh and ah over. They got engaged right after Emily graduated, in this big, elaborate, Instagram-worthy proposal that David had clearly spent months planning. And I was actually happy for them. Genuinely happy. David was my best friend, and seeing him so head over heels in love, it was nice. Plus, and this is a significant factor, David had a calming effect on Emily. He seemed to mellow her out, to smooth out her rough edges, to make her almost tolerable. At their wedding, I was David's best woman. I stood up there, next to him, watching him say his vows, and I felt this complicated mix of emotions. Pride, relief, a touch of sadness, maybe even a little bit of envy. I thought they were solid, a sure thing. I thought they'd make it, against all odds. 2 years. That's all it took for the whole picture-perfect facade to come crashing down, to shatter into a million pieces. 2 years into their marriage, the ugly truth came out. Emily was having an affair, a blatant, unapologetic, in-your-face affair with some guy from her accounting firm, a smarmy, slick-haired dude named Ryan. David found out, and it was the classic, cliché scenario, ripped straight from the pages of a soap opera. He saw some incriminating texts on her phone, messages that left absolutely no room for doubt or misinterpretation. He confronted her, and Emily, to her credit, I suppose, didn't even try to deny it. She didn't make excuses, didn't try to gaslight him, didn't try to spin some elaborate web of lies. She just admitted it. But her reasoning? That's what really, truly got to me. That's what pushed me over the edge. She said she was bored. Bored. Like marriage was some kind of Netflix subscription she could just cancel when she wasn't feeling entertained anymore. She said the affair didn't mean anything, that it was just a fling, a way to spice things up. And then, the absolute kicker, she offered to work on things, to give their marriage another try, like she was doing him a huge, magnanimous favor. David, understandably, wasn't having any of it. He was devastated, heartbroken, enraged. He filed for divorce, and it was brutal. A messy, protracted, emotionally draining legal battle that left everyone involved feeling bruised, battered, and utterly exhausted. And what made it even worse, what truly twisted the knife, was Emily's audacity. Her sheer, unmitigated, breathtaking nerve. She, the cheater, the one who had betrayed her husband, the one who had shattered their vows, demanded alimony. She had a good job, a well-paying job as an accountant. She didn't need the money. It was pure spite, a way to punish David for what? For not being exciting enough? For not keeping her constantly entertained? It was revolting. It was disgusting. I sided with David. Without hesitation, without a second thought, without a shred of doubt. Because, duh, he was my friend, my best friend, and Emily was 100%, unequivocally, in the wrong. There was no gray area here, no room for ambiguity, no justification for her behavior. She had cheated, she had lied, she had broken her promises. And she was trying to profit from it. Emily, predictably, lost it. She went completely ballistic. She went running to our parents, crying and wailing and playing the victim, claiming I was disloyal, that I was betraying her, that family should always stick together, no matter what. She painted this distorted, twisted picture of me as the villain, the traitor, the one who was siding with the enemy. And my parents. They bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. They swallowed her sob story whole, without even questioning it, without even considering David's side of the story. They always had. They called this big, formal, utterly ridiculous family meeting, more like an inquisition, really, and it was just surreal. They sat me down, like I was a child being scolded, and told me, in no uncertain terms, that I had to cut David out of my life. Completely. Because he had wronged Emily. Because he had hurt her. Because he was no longer family. I remember just staring at them, dumbfounded, speechless, utterly incredulous. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I tried to reason with them, to explain the situation, to make them see the blatant injustice of it all. But it was like talking to a brick wall, like trying to reason with a pair of stubborn, willfully ignorant mules. I told them they were being ridiculous, that they were being completely unreasonable, that they were letting their emotions cloud their judgment. David was my friend long before he was Emily's husband. And she was the one who cheated. She was the one who had destroyed their marriage. She was the one who was in the wrong. But they wouldn't listen. They were so blinded by their love for Emily, their unwavering belief in her inherent goodness, their deeply ingrained habit of always taking her side, that they couldn't see the truth, even when it was slapping them in the face. Emily, of course, was sitting there, smug and self-satisfied, reveling in the drama, enjoying the spectacle of me being publicly humiliated and condemned. She accused me of sabotaging her chances of getting a bigger settlement, which, let's be honest, was probably true. I wasn't about to let her get away with screwing David over any more than she already had. She accused me of being jealous of her, of always resenting her happiness, of secretly wanting her to fail. And that's when I snapped. I completely lost it. All the years of pent-up frustration, all the simmering resentment, all the suppressed anger. It just erupted, like a volcano that had been dormant for far too long. I told her she didn't deserve a dime, that she had zero morals, zero ethics, zero sense of decency. I told her she was a selfish, spoiled, entitled brat who didn't care about anyone but herself. It got ugly. Really ugly. Voices were raised, Accusations were flung, tears were shed. It was a full-blown, knockdown, drag-out family feud. I remember storming out of the house, slamming the door behind me so hard that the pictures on the wall rattled, feeling this strange mixture of rage, relief, and a profound sense of liberation. A few days later, my parents called. The tone of their voices. It was cold, formal, detached, like they were talking to a stranger, a business associate, not their own daughter. They were cutting me off. Completely. Emily had given them an ultimatum, her or me. And they chose her. Without hesitation, without a second thought, without even a hint of regret. They even had the gall, the sheer audacity, to say I could fix things, that I could make amends, by dumping David, by abandoning my friend in his time of need, by betraying my own values and principles. But by then, it was a matter of principle. It wasn't just about David anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, about refusing to be bullied, manipulated, and controlled. I told them good luck, and I hung up. The finality of it. It hit me hard. I felt this hollow ache in my chest, this profound sense of loss and betrayal. But also, a strange sense of freedom. 3 years. 3 years of silence. 3 years of building my own life, my own path, without them. I saw them occasionally, in passing, at the grocery store or at a local event, but we avoided each other like the plague. It was awkward, painful, uncomfortable, but necessary. It hurt, of course it hurt. They were my parents. But I had to come to terms with the fact that they had made their choice, and I had to respect that, even if I vehemently disagreed with it. I focused on my career, on my friends, on building something for myself. I poured all my energy into my work as a graphic designer, freelancing for various clients, slowly but surely building up a solid reputation and a steady income. And, thanks to a few lucky breaks and a lot of hard work, I finally landed a dream job at a prestigious design firm in San Francisco. Then, out of the blue, after 3 years of complete radio silence, of no contact whatsoever, my parents show up. At my office. I was in the middle of a meeting with a major client, presenting a new branding campaign, when my assistant buzzed me, saying, "There are 2 people here to see you. They say they're your parents." My heart. It skipped a beat. I felt this surge of adrenaline, this jolt of I don't even know what. Anxiety? Dread? Anger? It was a confusing, overwhelming cocktail of emotions. I excused myself from the meeting, took a deep breath, and walked out to the reception area. And there they were. My mom, looking older, more haggard, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy, and my dad, his usual stoic expression replaced by a look of desperation? Shame? They were all smiles and forced pleasantries, acting like nothing had happened, like we were just old friends catching up after a long absence. After some excruciatingly awkward small talk about my life, about my job, about the weather, they finally dropped the bomb. The real reason for their unexpected, unwelcome visit. And it wasn't to apologize. Oh no. It was far, far worse. They needed money. Not for them, they were quick to assure me, oh no, not for them. For Emily. It turned out that Emily, the golden child, the princess, the perpetually pampered and indulged little sister, was getting married again. To Ryan, the affair partner, the smarmy, slick-haired accountant who had helped her blow up her first marriage. Apparently, she'd conveniently omitted that little detail from her narrative when she'd been spinning her sob story to our parents. They'd been together since the divorce, living in blissful, adulterous sin, and now they were engaged. And Emily, being Emily, wanted a grand wedding, a lavish, extravagant, over-the-top affair that would make everyone forget about the first one, the one that had ended in such spectacular, humiliating failure. A do-over, she called it. The price tag? A staggering $75,000. $75,000. I just stared at them, speechless, blinking, trying to process the sheer absurdity of it all. I thought I must have misheard. $75,000? For a wedding? It was obscene. It was preposterous. It was. Emily. We weren't exactly the Vanderbilts. My dad was a retired high school history teacher, a man who had dedicated his life to educating young minds, not to amassing a fortune. And my mom worked part-time as a librarian, a job she loved, but one that didn't exactly come with a 6-figure salary. They had some savings, sure, but $75,000? That was their retirement fund, their nest egg, their safety net. That was insane. They told me the wedding was still a few months away, so it wasn't urgent, Like they needed the money right that very second. They could contribute some money, they said, a small portion of their savings, but nowhere near the full amount. Ryan's family, apparently, had already said they couldn't help, that they weren't in a position to contribute anything significant. But my parents, in their infinite wisdom and unwavering devotion to Emily, had already promised her they'd cover it. They'd made this grand, sweeping, utterly irresponsible promise before they knew the actual cost, before Emily had presented them with her meticulously detailed budget, complete with Pinterest boards, magazine clippings, and spreadsheets. Then they heard about my new job, about my success, about the fact that I was finally, after years of struggling, financially stable. They saw it as a sign, a divine intervention, a message from the universe telling them to come crawling back to me, their estranged daughter, the one they had cast aside like a piece of unwanted trash. They said this wedding meant everything to Emily, that she'd been traumatized by the divorce from David, the divorce she had caused, let's not forget, that she needed this, that she deserved this, that it was her chance to finally have the fairy tale she'd always dreamed of. And that I, the dutiful, responsible, long-suffering older sister, had a chance to be a good sister, to make amends, to heal the rift, by paying for it. I literally laughed in their faces. A full-blown, unrestrained, borderline hysterical laugh. I couldn't help it. It was just so absurd, so outrageous, so unbelievably, pathetically entitled. After 3 years of silence, after they had chosen her over me, after they had ripped my heart out and stomped on it, they thought I'd just write them a check for $75,000, no questions asked? I told them absolutely not, in no uncertain terms. I told them they were delusional if they thought I'd give them a single penny, a single red cent, towards Emily's extravagant, ridiculous, unnecessary wedding. They weren't amused. Not even a little bit. They started yelling, getting defensive, accusing me of being selfish, ungrateful, heartless, jealous. They said I had no sense of family loyalty, that Emily was right about me, that I was a disappointment. They dredged up every past mistake, every perceived slight, every childhood argument, throwing them in my face like weapons. And that's when I lost it. Completely. All the anger, all the hurt, all the resentment that I'd been bottling up for years. It just exploded. I unleashed the full force of my fury on them, holding nothing back. I told them they had no right to lecture me about family, about loyalty, about anything. That they were the reason Emily and I were estranged, that they were the ones who had created this toxic, dysfunctional dynamic, this constant competition, this blatant favoritism. I reminded them, in excruciating detail, how they'd always favored Emily, how they'd spoiled her rotten, how they'd expected me to just accept it, to just be the bigger person, to just swallow my feelings and put up with her endless tantrums and demands. I told them they'd failed as parents, miserably, spectacularly, and that's why Emily was a selfish, entitled, narcissistic monster who didn't care about anyone but herself. I told them that it was their fault that neither of their children gave a damn about them. That if Emily really cared, if she had an ounce of empathy, an ounce of compassion, an ounce of basic human decency, she wouldn't have asked for this. She would have done the math. She would have realized how unreasonable, how unrealistic, how utterly unsustainable her demands were. She would have scaled it down, found a more affordable option, or, gasp, even considered paying for it herself. But she didn't care. And neither did I. My mom started crying, her face crumpling, tears streaming down her cheeks, her carefully applied makeup running in rivulets. My dad, his face contorted with rage, his fists clenched, started shouting at me, calling me every name in the book, cursing me, telling me I was a disgrace to the family name. Then they stormed off, leaving me standing there, shaking, trembling, feeling a strange mixture of exhilaration and exhaustion. A few hours later, I got a text from my dad. A long, rambling, emotionally manipulative text. He was deeply disappointed in me, he said. My words had broken his heart. My mom was a wreck, inconsolable, completely devastated. He accused me of being cruel, heartless, unfeeling, and unforgiving. Update 1. After reading all of your comments, and after talking to some of you privately, I know, without a shadow of a doubt, that I did the right thing. I blocked them. Both of them. On everything. It's been a week since that awful, explosive confrontation, and I haven't heard a peep from them. Which, honestly, is a massive relief. It's ironic, isn't it? My dad unblocked me just to send that guilt trip text, that pathetic attempt at emotional blackmail. He hadn't bothered to check on me in years, not once, not even a single phone call or text message. But the minute they needed something, the minute they wanted something from me, suddenly I was important again, suddenly I mattered. And yes, David knows about Emily's engagement. He saw it on social media, like everyone else. He's fine with it, surprisingly. He's moved on, he's dating again, he's happy, he's thriving. He actually laughed when I told him about my parents' visit, about their audacious, preposterous request. We joked about how Emily needed therapy after the divorce, after she was the one who had traumatized everyone involved. The sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy. It's mind-boggling. I'm staying away from my parents. Permanently. It's the best thing for my mental health, for my sanity, for my overall well-being. I've built a good life for myself, a life free from their drama, their toxicity, their constant demands and expectations. And I'm not going to let them back in, not this time, not ever. Update 2. Just when I thought things were finally starting to calm down, just when I thought I could finally breathe a sigh of relief and move on with my life. They're back. Or rather, he's back. 2 weeks ago, my parents showed up at my office again. I had specifically blocked them on everything after that last, disastrous encounter, hoping to avoid any further contact, any further drama. But they found a way around it. My dad called me from a burner phone, a disposable phone with an untraceable number. I was in the middle of a crucial project, working late to meet a deadline, and I answered the phone without thinking, assuming it was a work-related call. And then I heard his voice. My dad's voice. My stomach dropped. I felt this instant wave of nausea, this surge of dread and anxiety. He was outside. Standing outside my office building. Demanding to talk to me. He said he wasn't there about the money. This time, he swore, on his mother's grave, it wasn't about the wedding. He wanted to talk about my mom. He said she'd completely broken down after our last conversation, that she was a shadow of her former self, that she was inconsolable, depressed, unable to function. And that the only thing that could possibly help her, that could pull her out of this downward spiral, was if I visited her, if I talked to her, if I made amends. My dad seemed genuinely distraught, genuinely worried, genuinely desperate. His voice was shaking, cracking with emotion, and I could hear the raw pain in his tone. It put me in a tough spot, a really, really difficult position. I didn't want to hurt him, intentionally. I didn't want to cause him any more pain. But at the same time, I wasn't going to be manipulated. I wasn't going to be guilt-tripped or emotionally blackmailed into doing something I didn't want to do, something that went against every fiber of my being. I told him, as calmly and as firmly as I could, that I wasn't going to visit. Not now, not ever. Not until they both apologized. A sincere, genuine, heartfelt apology, not just some empty words, not just some half-hearted attempt to save face. And even then, even if they did apologize, even if they did somehow manage to muster up the courage and humility to admit they were wrong, I'd need time to think about it, to process it, to decide if I could ever truly forgive them, if I could ever trust them again. I reminded him, again, that they hadn't spoken to me in 3 years, not a word, not a text, not a single attempt to reach out, to check on me, to see how I was doing. And that before the estrangement, they hadn't treated me well, they hadn't been good parents, they hadn't shown me the love and respect and support that I deserved. They had always favored Emily, they had always put her needs and wants above mine, they had always made me feel like I was less than, like I was somehow not good enough. I told him I'd built a life without them, a happy, successful, fulfilling life. And that they only seemed to care about me, to remember my existence, when they needed something, when they wanted something from me. Whether it was my money, my time, my emotional labor, or my forgiveness, it was always about them, always about their needs, their desires, their agenda. I told him I was busy, that I had a job to do, that I couldn't just drop everything and run to their rescue every time they snapped their fingers. And then I warned him, in no uncertain terms, that if he harassed me at work again, if he showed up unannounced, if he tried to contact me through a blocked number, if he ever tried to pull a stunt like this again, I would call the police. I would not hesitate. I would file a restraining order. I would do whatever it took to protect myself, my peace of mind, and my sanity. Then I hung up. I walked away, leaving him standing there, feeling, I don't even know what. Angry, frustrated, exhausted, drained, but also strangely empowered. Update 3. I'm back, and thankfully, this update isn't directly about my parents. Though, technically, it is related to them, indirectly. It's more about the fallout, the ripple effect, the collateral damage of their toxic, dysfunctional behavior. First, a quick response to the person who commented on my last update, the one who said I should have called the cops on my dad immediately, that I was being a pushover, a doormat, for not doing so. You clearly haven't worked in a high-pressure, client-facing job. Having the police show up at your office, in the middle of the workday? It's terrible for your professional reputation. It creates a scene, it disrupts the workflow, it makes you look unstable and unreliable. I did what I had to do to protect my career, my livelihood. Anyway, on to the actual update. As I mentioned before, I still have, or had, a relatively decent relationship with my extended family, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. They know about the falling out, the estrangement, the whole messy, complicated situation with my parents and Emily. They've heard both sides of the story, and they've, for the most part, wisely chosen to stay neutral, to not get involved in the family drama. Recently, one of my cousins, Ashley, a genuinely kind, sweet, and supportive person, announced her engagement. There was a big family engagement party, a celebration, a chance for everyone to come together and share in her joy. And my parents weren't invited. I found out why, and it just confirmed everything I already knew about Emily and my parents, everything I'd been trying to tell everyone for years. It turns out, Ashley had had a major falling out with Emily, a huge, explosive argument. Emily, in her infinite wisdom, boundless self-absorption, and breathtaking lack of self-awareness, had accused Ashley of trying to steal her thunder, of deliberately getting engaged to overshadow her upcoming wedding, the one I refused to pay for, remember? The accusation was so absurd, so ridiculous, so utterly, pathetically Emily, that Ashley, understandably, decided to cut her off. Completely. She didn't want that kind of negativity, that kind of toxicity, that kind of insane drama in her life, especially not during such a happy and important time. And honestly, who can blame her? And because my parents, predictably, reflexively, almost robotically, took Emily's side, blindly defending her, attacking Ashley, accusing her of being selfish and insensitive, Ashley decided not to invite them to the party either. She didn't want them there, spreading their negativity, their bitterness, their resentment, ruining her special day. So, I was the only one from my immediate family who was invited. Ashley made it clear that she didn't blame me, that she knew I had nothing to do with my parents or Emily's appalling behavior. She said the decision to exclude them was entirely based on their own actions, their own words, their own toxic, dysfunctional dynamic, not on anything I had said or done. But my parents, of course, couldn't see it that way. They couldn't accept responsibility for their own actions, their own choices. They had to blame someone, and who better to blame than me, the convenient scapegoat, the exiled daughter, the black sheep of the family. They went on a social media rampage, posting this long, rambling, incoherent, utterly unhinged rant on Facebook, a public airing of their grievances, a desperate attempt to smear my name and damage my reputation. They claimed they'd stayed silent about my jealous and insecure behavior towards Emily for years, that they'd been protecting me, shielding me from the consequences of my supposed actions. But now, since I'd allegedly turned the family against them, since I'd poisoned everyone's minds against them, they felt they had no choice but to speak out, to reveal the truth about me. They called me every name in the book: selfish, insecure, ungrateful, a loser, a failure, a disgrace. They accused me of sabotaging Emily's happiness, of resenting her success, of being jealous of her perfect life, which, let's be real, is anything but perfect. They even said, and this is the real kicker, they even said they were going to disinherit me, that they were happy to no longer call me their daughter. Honestly, I scrolled through the post, feeling this strange mixture of anger, amusement, and pity. It was so pathetic, so desperate, so transparently false, so obviously a cry for attention, a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control over a situation that had spiraled completely out of their control. And it was so clearly a lie. Everyone who knew me, everyone who knew my family, everyone who had even a passing acquaintance with Emily and my parents, knew it was a fabrication, a distortion of the truth, a desperate attempt to rewrite history. I didn't respond. I didn't engage. I didn't dignify their rant with a reply. I told everyone who sent me the post, who asked me about it, not to bother arguing with my parents, not to waste their time or energy engaging with their toxicity. It was clear they'd lost all sense of reason, all touch with reality, all semblance of decency. No one who actually mattered, no one whose opinion I valued, would believe a single word of it. So, it wasn't doing any real damage to my reputation, to my relationships, to my life. Let them talk. Let them rant. Let them rave. Let them make fools of themselves. I'm so far above all this nonsense, all this petty drama, all this childish, toxic behavior. And I'm incredibly grateful for the relatives who have supported me, who have stood by me, who have seen through my parents and Emily's lies and manipulations, who have chosen kindness, empathy, and understanding over bitterness, resentment, and blind loyalty. Update 4. It's been a couple of months since my last update, a period of relative peace and quiet, thankfully. A blessed respite from the constant drama and toxicity that had been my family life for far too long. Most of our extended family, the ones who had remained neutral, the ones who had tried to stay out of the fray, have now completely stopped talking to my parents. They've seen their true colors, their ugliness, their unwavering support of Emily's appalling behavior, their complete lack of empathy and compassion, their willingness to throw anyone under the bus to protect their precious golden child. And they've made the wise, understandable, and frankly, long overdue decision to distance themselves, to cut off contact, to protect their own mental health and well-being. My parents, I'm sure, would blame me for that, too. They'd probably say I'd poisoned everyone against them, that I'd manipulated the situation, that I'd somehow orchestrated this mass exodus from their lives. But at this point, there was no use in making more public posts, more accusations, more desperate attempts to smear my name. The damage had already been done. They'd reached a point of no return. Their bridges were burned, reduced to ashes, scattered to the wind. And as for me? I was perfectly content, perfectly happy, perfectly at peace without them in my life. Honestly, I was thriving. My career was flourishing, my friendships were strong and supportive, and I had finally, after years of turmoil and heartache, found a sense of inner peace, a sense of calm, a sense of freedom. And then, I learned something new. Something that, in a strange, twisted, almost karmic way, brought a sense of closure? Justice? I don't know the right word. I found out from a few relatives who are still, somehow, inexplicably, in touch with my parents, that Emily has cut ties with them. My parents, the ones who had sacrificed everything for her, who had defended her, who had coddled her, who had enabled her, who had chosen her over me, over and over again, were now estranged from her, from their precious, perfect, golden child. My parents weren't at her wedding. The $75,000 wedding that I had refused to fund, the one that had been the catalyst for this whole, epic family meltdown. Their absence raised a lot of questions, a lot of eyebrows, a lot of whispers and speculation. And some relatives, the bolder ones, the ones who weren't afraid to confront them, decided to ask my parents directly what was going on, what had happened, why they weren't there to celebrate their daughter's special day. And the story they told. It was classic Emily. Vintage Emily. Pure, unadulterated, textbook Emily. My parents, finally, after years of enabling her, of indulging her every whim, of catering to her every demand, had put their foot down. They'd told Emily, in no uncertain terms, that her wedding budget was way beyond their means, that they couldn't afford it, that they couldn't bankrupt themselves, drain their retirement fund, jeopardize their future security, for her vanity project. This led to a huge fight, a monumental, earth-shattering, nuclear-level blowout. Emily, predictably, was furious. She accused them of breaking their promise, of going back on their word, of ruining her dream wedding, of not loving her enough, of not supporting her, of not being good parents. My parents tried to explain, to reason with her, to make her understand. They told her they'd made those promises assuming her plans would be within a reasonable budget, that they'd expected her to be, well, reasonable. But her plans were far too extravagant, too over the top, too unrealistic, too Emily. They also needed to think about their own future, their own retirement, their own financial security. Let me know your thoughts, your reactions, your judgments, everything, down in the comments below. And, if you found this story even remotely entertaining, intriguing, or relatable, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support really does mean the world to me and it helps me keep creating content. Also, don't forget to smash that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when I upload a new video. Thanks for watching.